Okay, let's say our last Divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord of God, rule of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah, which today we will take a little bit more literally than sometimes we do, a more narrow definition of the words of Torah, because we indeed have words from the Torah today. We start with a picture of Rivka Street in Jerusalem. Our prologue, we are introduced to Rivka. This comes after the binding of Isaac. Some people think that this is a foreshadowing of the next part of the story in the Bible, because Sarah will die right after this. And others think that this is perhaps indicating a new beginning to the next part of the Jewish people. Interestingly, Rebecca is the only woman in the Bible whose birth is recorded, and her birth is considered noteworthy enough to interrupt the action between the binding of Isaac and the death and burial of Sarah. All right. So Act 1, we meet Rebecca, as the American Girl series says. So scene 1, Abraham tells his servant, who we know from previous chapters is named Eliezer, that he should go and get a wife for Abraham's son Isaac. And what's interesting is that this is not supposed to be a wife who comes from the local area, the land of Canaan, but rather from Abraham's birth, which means that Sarah's born there, Rebecca's born there, Rachel's born there, and Leah are all born in this area. And at the time, that area was a matriarchal and matrilineal society, where women were recognized as individuals with rights and not just considered property. And so by sending Eliezer there, Abraham ensures that Isaac's wife would have the same ideas of her worth as a woman that Sarah had. So there's some extra oomph behind having him get away from there. So Eliezer takes 10 camels and all the bounty of his master. He goes to the town, which is about a three-week walk away by camel, and he says, God, please make a sign for me of who I should choose, because there are lots of women here. And the maiden who says, to whom I ask, can I please have some water? She says, drink, and I'll give you water for your camels. Then I'll know that's the one I'm looking for. Now, given that it is no small matter to draw water for 10 camels, this means that Isaac's wife, through this test, will be someone who is thoughtful and generous and physically strong. All valuable traits. Interestingly, in the trope, when Eliezer says this prayer, this request of God, there's a shalshelet on the trope, on the word Vayomer, I believe. And a shalshelet looks like, it literally means chain, and it looks like 3 less than signs stacked on top of each other. It's incredibly rare. It only happens 4 times in the entire Torah, and it indicates reluctance. So here we have it with the story of Joseph, when Joseph is turning down Mrs. Potiphar. We have it with Lot's wife when she is reluctant to leave. And we have it with Moses when he turns over the priesthood to Aaron. The Shalshelet is a long trope. I'll sing it for you because it's not so common and therefore unlikely that you'll come across it all that often. Shalshelet. What about like Woody Woodpecker? But that's one of the unique pieces of this particular scene in the story. And because of that, because of this reluctance, Rashi makes a midrash that Eliezer might have had a reason for being reluctant, such as perhaps he had his own daughter that he was hoping to marry to Isaac instead if Isaac didn't have a wife. But that is Rashi's midrash. It is not in the actual text. All right, scene 3. So Rebecca shows up right after Eliezer finishes with his prayer test of who he knows is going to be the right person. And she fulfills the requirements. She not only draws for the camels, but she offers to keep drawing until they finish drinking, which is above and beyond what Eliezer asked for. After she's done, Eliezer gives her some jewelry, asks who she is, and she says, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah and Nahor, which makes her Abraham's family, and there's plenty of space to spend the night. So this is, so it's interesting because she could have lied. She could have said, I don't know who you are. We don't have any space. Sorry. But instead, she chooses to be hospitable, which means that she exhibits the traits of Abraham, who a few chapters earlier offered hospitality to strangers who were passing through the area, even though he had just circumcised himself at the age of 99. So he could have had an excuse for being like, you know, I usually offer hospitality, but I'm not feeling up to it today. But no, Abraham gets up and he runs to the guests and says, please turn aside, stay here. And Rebecca also offers hospitality in the same trait as Abraham. All right, scene 4. So Rebecca runs home and tells her family about this, and her brother Laban says, come to our house, we've got plenty of space for you and your camels. So the camels get some food, he gets a foot bath, and the people with him get a foot bath, but he doesn't eat until he recaps the entire story. And then Laban and Bethuel, her brother and father, say, the matter was decreed by Adonai, take Rebecca and go, let her be a wife to your master's son as Adonai has spoken. So what's interesting here is that they are referring to the same God that Abraham worships. And we see that again in the story of Laban and Jacob, which we just read the other week, where Laban again refers to that same God. So it seems likely that Rebecca has grown up being aware of and praying to the same God that Isaac has, which makes them which means that they have another piece that they already agree on. When you get married, you have to integrate 2 different ways of doing things, from ideas about how to raise kids to ideas about how to load the dishwasher. And in their case, Isaac and Rebecca at least don't have to integrate 2 different gods to pray to. So that is noteworthy and useful in their case.
David?
Yes.
This is not in the text, is it?
Well, verse 50, then Laban and Bethuel answered, the matter was decreed by Adonai. We cannot speak to you, good or bad. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her in, let her be a wife to your master's son, as Adonai has spoken. They could have said, as the gods have spoken.
I hear you and I see what you're saying, but I'm seeing that this is, as I recollect, this is the only time I've ever seen this kind of passage. And I don't know that it's, I guess you can imply it, but I don't know that it's textual to say that they would have acknowledged and prayed to this God. Maybe they recognized him without actually praying to him. Because they were multi God worshippers, weren't they? Idols, plural, if I'm not mistaken.
That's possible. We do have a situation with Teraphim later on when Rachel steals her father Laban's Teraphim.
Right.
So depending on how you interpret what Teraphim are and what they're used for, seeing as how King David also had Teraphim, so you can either say David was an idol worshiper, or you can say Laban was not an idol worshiper, but it's a little hard to do both. So either way, I think it is fair to say that Rebekah was aware of God, and God was, acknowledged as a deity who had some say and was worth talking to.
Would you think that
I'm buying what you said. Thank you.
Great.
Would you think that Abraham, if my memory's not failing me, had some discourse with other family members before he decided to move on farther west?
Yes. So
there's some.
Yeah. That's certainly borne out by the text. At the very end of Parshat Noach, in the end of chapter 11 of Genesis, Terach, who is Abraham's father, moves with Abram at that point, and his brother Nahor and his brother Haran away from Ur Kasdim, away from their hometown, towards the land of Canaan. They settle in the town of Haran, which is on the way. Abraham's brother Haran dies in the city of Haran, confusing, which is where Lot comes from. Lot is the dead brother's son. The third brother, Nahor, is the one who is Rebekah's grandfather through Bethuel. So it seems likely that Abram may have talked about whatever ideas he had, which are not stated in the text itself, with his family, particularly either before they left or on their way, or when they settled in the way stop, the layover in Syria where Terach dies. So while it's not recorded, it would make perfect sense that yes, they did have some conversation.
David?
Yes.
So how was Sarah and Abraham related?
So Abraham, so they were married. Abraham also says when he they go to, I think, Egypt, they go to two different places, and he says it's one of them. It's either to Egypt or to Gerar. And he says in both cases, she's my sister, she's not my wife, therefore you don't have to kill me just because you like her. And then in both cases, they get found out. I think through God, God afflicting Pharaoh and God coming to Avimelech in a dream. And in one of the cases, which, seeing if I can find it, the king is like, what the heck? Why did you say she was your sister? And Abraham's like, well, she's kind of my sister because we share the same father, but not the same mother. So that would make them half siblings.
I thought I
yeah.
read or heard something long ago that she was his first cousin.
Um,
I don't remember if that's in the text or not.
I heard a niece rather than half siblings.
yeah. Let's see. Hold on, I may be misremembering. All right, so Genesis 20, verse 10. What then, Avimelech demanded of Abraham, was your purpose in doing this thing? I thought, said Abraham, verse 11, surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife, verse 12. And besides, she is in truth my sister, my father's daughter, though not my mother's, and she became my wife. Verse 13, so when God made me wander from my father's house, I said to her, let this be the kindness that you shall do to me. Whatever place we come to, say there of me, he is my brother. So, and there is a comment in the Eitz Chaim Chumash that when it says she is in truth my sister, the statement must be derived from a tradition of great antiquity because marrying a half-sister was forbidden in later Israel. And also my father's daughter, though not my mother's. Although abhorrence of incest is nearly universal, the definition of prohibited kinship marriage varies widely among societies. So that's what the text says.
I have a question based on that comment.
Please.
Does this imply that the Noahide laws don't forbid that kind of relationship, or is the implication that this is just a forbidden relationship according to even those laws?
I am not sure about. I'm not sure what the Noahide laws say exactly on this matter, but I will look into it and get back to you.
Thank you. I was just curious because of an implication. I didn't know if it's
Yeah.
like what the point kind of was with that little detail exactly. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Have we cleared up, or possibly further complicated, the relationship between Abraham and Sarah? I'll take that as a yes. Okay. Moving on, scene 5. So Eliezer brings out objects of silver and gold and garments, gives them to Rebecca, gives a bride price to her brother and her mother. Father has disappeared. He wants to leave the next day. Our brother and mother wants to use a stalling technique and say, let her stay some 10 days. He wants to go immediately. They let Rebecca decide. And they send her off with her nurse. And so we see from this that Rebecca has a fair bit of gumption to be willing to go off to a place she doesn't know, to marry a man she's never met, and in fact doesn't yet even know his name at this point. But she's willing to go off into the wilderness, to the land of Canaan, which again has her paralleled with Abraham, who also was willing to go off to the land of Canaan, to a place he'd never seen, and just had to take some divine one's faith about. But off he went to the wilderness. There's one other intertextual connection here between Abraham and Rebecca. Before Rebecca leaves, her brother and her mother give her a blessing that her descendants will inherit the gates of their foes. This same language about inherit the gates of their foes was said to Abraham after the binding of Isaac, right before Rebecca is born. So some see the birth of Rebecca right after that language, and then this echo of that language here as saying that through that the chain of transmission and of inheritance passes from Abraham down to Rebecca. And later on, we'll see where it goes from there. So a number of parallels here between Abraham and Rebecca. All right, scene 6. So 3 weeks later, according to my calculations, they finally reach the Negev, and Isaac is out walking the field, and he sees the camels coming. Rebecca sees Isaac. She wants to know who it is. Eliezer says, "That's my master." So she covers herself up, and then Isaac marries Rebecca and loves her. And this is, I did some research last week, this is the first example of romantic love in the Bible. The only other use of the verb to love before that, or before this, is parental love, when God is telling Abraham, take the son that you love to Mount Moriah for the binding of Isaac. We also see that Isaac is fairly passive up until this point. Like, things happen to him. He doesn't actively do anything. And this is the first time where we see that he actively takes action. He brings her into the tent that used to belong to his mother. He took Rebecca as his wife. He loved her. So it seems that Rebecca is bringing out the best in Isaac. One way of looking at things.
David,
Yes.
isn't there the at least implication that Yitzhak took affirmative action by praying in the field?
Well,
he prayed to God in the
Well, I suppose you could say that when he goes out walking in the field, that is some taking action. What he is doing in the field, when it says "Vayetzei Yitzchak lansuach basadeh," he goes out, and he, in order to suach, whatever that means. Some interpret that as walking. Some interpret that as meditating. Some take a second step of interpretation beyond meditating and say that he's praying. That same root today, lasiach, is a sicha, is a conversation. So yes, he is doing something active by going out into the field. That is a fair point.
Nice.
All right. Shifting position so I can plug in my device. Okay, so we have here an example of a synagogue that has taken this story and put it as artwork, and all the possible interpretations that could mean as to what message they're saying, which we're not going to discuss again this week. Okay, Act 2, changes for Rebecca. So, scene 1, we get a recap of the story, and then we find out that Isaac is 40 years old, and Isaac pleads with God on behalf of his wife because she's barren. God responds to his plea, and Rebecca conceives. So some people interpret this as a positive sign, that Isaac and Rebecca have a positive marriage, that Rebecca doesn't need to say anything to Isaac. He just knows what she needs, and he takes actions to fulfill her and their desires. So that's one way of looking at this particular text. And again, we have the idea that we are reintroducing Isaac here because Abraham has now died between Act 1 and Act 2, and this is a new chapter in the story of the Jewish people. Scene 2. So she's pregnant, but she's got a lot of fighting internally. So she goes to inquire of God, which if she didn't know about God or believe in God before, she certainly does now. She's willing to go ask. And God gives her an oracle that 2 nations are in your womb, 2 separate people shall issue from your body, 1 people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So
David,
yes.
what does it mean she went to inquire of God? Where would she have gone? There was no temple.
It's a little unclear.
Yeah, commentary.
The commentaries have a lot of fun with this one, trying to answer that question, because you have just walked into a 2,000-year-old conversation, and you're in very good company asking that exact question, Herb.
Indeed.
My boots aren't high enough.
Yes, they are. Herb. Don't be modest.
I don't have an answer that I like yet.
So, but they were communicating with the Supreme Being, with Adonai at that time. And so, why would you not go and inquire or ask more questions?
Right, that's fair. What does occur to
the first prayer was fulfilled. There's a concession. You're going to bear a child or children, and so next stage, what's happening? Why am I having these problems?
Right. So one thing that occurs to me is that in the story of Abraham, we meet a figure named Melchizedek, who is known as I believe he's introduced as the priest of Shalem, the city of Shalem, which many take to be Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, it's related linguistically. And he brings, and after Abraham has rescued Lot from the kings that have abducted him, then Melchizedek comes out to greet him with, I believe, bread and wine, and Melchizedek says something about El Elyon Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, God on high, who created the heavens and the earth, which is a phrase from this non-Jewish guy that gets put into our Amidah. Konei Hakol, Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, it's in the Friday night service as well. So there are occasional other figures. Balaam is another guy later on in the Torah who's not Jewish but has a direct connection with God. So it's possible that she went to an unnamed figure to inquire. She didn't go to Abraham because he was dead by this point. And anybody else would be extra biblical, so you can make up your own story as well as anybody else can.
I have a related question. Could that place or location refer to a cultic space? We see the
But the question is a good question.
I ask because I know a lot of the different patriarchs, they set up different kinds of spaces where they interact with God. So for example, Jacob at Bethel.
Please.
So yeah, that's what I was thinking. What do you think
Say that
about
again?
that? Oh, I had said it was like the example with Jacob at Bethel. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought my internet cut out. Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That Jacob and Bethel, that he knows.
He set up like a cultic site there for sacrifice, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe she could have gone to a site that's similar to that.
Entirely possible.
David, why does she have to have gone anywhere? I mean, I know it says she went to, but if you change
Right.
the tense, you know, I'm going to speak to whoever. I'm going
Right.
to do whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, you know, you can say that without signifying any physical location.
That's true. That's another way of reading the text that would solve this problem entirely. That is a good point, because we already know that she's talking to God, or that Isaac's talking to God, and so she could just directly talk to God herself. All right, so she gives birth. There's Isaac. Sorry, there's Esau first, and there's Jacob, and this is 20 years after they got married. All right, which brings us to our new text. Diane, would you read this, please?
As soon as I unmute myself. Yeah. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Jacob became a mild man who stayed in the tents. The idiom for a pastoralist, Steve Ford, Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebecca favored Jacob.
All right, thank you. So, what might Rebecca be thinking during this part of the story?
Well, remembering what God had told her about the two nations, wondering how that was going to manifest itself. Don't all jump in.
She might have been thinking of her concern for her favorite one was because he was mild and was, you know, could have been, I don't know, physically overtaken by his brother.
And what might she be feeling during this part of the story?
You might have been thinking that Esau could take care of himself and had displayed that, but that Jacob needed some encouraging to be able to take care of himself in later life. And she had to help him develop.
she might have been thinking that Esau was to be worried more about him because he was more of a risk taker, and that Jacob wasn't putting himself out in harm's way, and she was more reassured about not as concerned about his welfare.
I'm thinking the opposite, Carol. Thinking that she's concerned that Yaakov may not have the intestinal fortitude to put up with his brother's ruggedness and bossiness. Although Yaakov showed his skill, I'm thinking she sees the promise of Yaakov by, if she knew that he bought the birthright, she could see that he has mental skills. He knows how to deal with his brother on an intellectual basis. But I think she's worried that her brother, that Yaakov is maybe not prepared to protect himself against Esav in Esav's worst moments, which comes to pass when Esav wants to kill him. And Yaakov has to run away. He can't stay there and protect himself. He's got to go. So I think she's overall concerned how this is going to play out. And she knows there is going to be a play that God described, and I think she's worried about just how it's going to play out. Speaking for myself, like Norman says, don't everybody jump in.
Well, maybe she was.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
No, I was going to say maybe she was concerned about Esau because he's a much more active, more physical man, that he might intimidate his younger brother, and she had a concern then that this prophecy may not come to the fore. How does the younger brother defend himself against the, let's say, the more physical, more aggressive? Because you're saying that Jacob is mild. I would think that means he's not as aggressive. He's calm, and he's not all that violent. He'll just cede to whatever his brother imposes. How do you resist it if you're mild?
How is she feeling toward Isaac at that point? Because if she had concerns about Esau's heavy-duty personality and was upset about maybe some of the choices that he made, and he was being supported by his father, maybe she was concerned that he was fostering this behavior in some way, and not too happy with Isaac at the point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Can hear you. Yes.
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 Okay. So I don't know what's going on with my internet, but fortunately, books do not require internet. So I'm going to read the next scene, and then we know what the questions are because they are the same throughout this entire source sheet. So Act 3 happens after Jacob after Jacob sells Esau a bowl of lentil soup in return for his birthright. So here we go. Chapter 26. There was a famine in the land, aside from the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Avimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. The Lord had appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I point out to you. Reside in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all these lands to you and your heirs, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your heirs as numerous as the stars of heaven, and assign to your heirs all of these lands, so that all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your heirs. inasmuch as Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my laws, and my teachings. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say, "my wife," thinking, the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. When some time had passed, Avimelech, king of the Philistines, looking out of the window, saw Isaac fondling his wife Rebekah. Avimelech sent for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Avimelech said, "What have you done to us? One of the people might have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." Avimelech then charged all the people, saying, "Anyone who molests this man or his wife shall be put to death." End of Act 3. So, what might Rebekah be thinking and or feeling during this scene?
Isaac thinks a little of me that he was willing to sacrifice me as his sister rather than just to save his own life.
Mhm.
Sorry, my soprano voice wouldn't work.
Not any different than what Abraham did. That seems to have been the general custom or pattern of action of folks at that time. That they'll cart off, or they're willing to kidnap somebody's sister, but not somebody's wife. There seems to be a very interesting line there where you will not cross if the man is married to the woman, but not if she's a sister. That's
I don't know, Charles. Does anybody share my thought that these guys are a little bit hesitant to put their full faith in God's umbrella, his opinions, his protection? That if they were straight up and said, "We are husband and wife," whether it was Abraham, Sarai, or Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka, that God would cover their backsides and take care of them. That they had to make the deception and risk what the reaction was of the kings of the lands. I don't know. I'm a little bit queasy about it, especially in the part of Yitzchak, because Abraham, he was flying solo on the new relationship with a monotheistic deity. But Yitzchak should have already been the beneficiary of the covenant between the pieces and the promise of God that there would be descendants of Abraham, and that would be Yitzchak, and as opposed to Ishmael, and it would go forward that way. Yitzchak may have wondered if it was going to be Esau or Yaakov, hypothetically, but he should have known it was going to come from him. As that shook out. So I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant to back up Yitzchak's play, although I see where Abraham's fear comes. But yet neither of them show the ultimate faith in God's protection. I'm good, guys. Take it away.
We know whether there was a practice of killing men to take their wives from them.
There was definitely a practice of abducting women, even if they were married, just because they were beautiful. There's an Egyptian story from this time called The Tale of Two Brothers, in which the king sees that a woman is beautiful, he knows she's married, and he takes her and makes her his wife anyway. Right. And we do know of King David who does this himself later on. So I don't know in that story whether or not he has the Pharaoh has the husband killed. I will look it up. But yes, it was certainly a realistic concern and not just a idle speculation. No pun intended.
I'd like to return to Barry's statement about, did Isaac have full belief in or trust in God? And shouldn't he have, and this is my interpretation of what you said, Barry, and shouldn't he have? But, he's only one generation removed from Abraham. He could just as easily have sat there and said, well, yeah, God was good to my father, but I don't know that he'll be good to me. It's not like, many generations have passed. There's lots of evidence of how God behaves towards Abraham and his descendants, where there was what I would call a strong level of trust built up. It's still pretty new.
Alan, you did very well. I commend you. Thank you. But I quoted a source. You remember what my source was? Why Yitzchak maybe should have put some strength into faith of God? Covenant between the pieces.
So
God promised Abraham there would be descendants of Abraham. And it was looking like Yitzchak was the guy. Where was his faith? Thank you. But you did beautiful. Thank you.
all right. And with that, we are out of time.
Wow, that
So-
one. Yes.